cookies use what's called the creaming method, and it's a very common method for making cookies, cakes, and muffins. But I'm going to show you how to do it for the sugar cookie recipe, and we're going to do it by hand. In the industry, we don't typically do it by hand, just because we typically make really big batches. But I did want to show you how to do it by hand in case you wanted to make this while you're at home. So first, I want to take a look at the mise en place that I have. So first, my ingredients. In this bowl, I have my fat and sugars, because the first step of my creaming method is going to be creaming my fat and my sugar, so I can have those all in one bowl. So my fat today is butter, and my sugars are white sugar and brown sugar. In my next bowl, I have 1 egg and my vanilla. So that's for my second step, which is to add the eggs gradually. In this bowl, I have all of my dry ingredients. So that's flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. Those are all the basic 3 steps to the creaming method. Cream your fats and sugars, add your eggs gradually, add all your dry. So that's the creaming method for the cookies. I also have some sprinkles, because I thought I might make a couple of them into Funfetti, because I thought that'd be cute. And then I also have a little bit of extra granulated sugar, so once they're done, I'm going to coat them in granulated sugar before they go into the oven. And that's just going to give this nice little crispness on the outside that's really nice. Equipment is pretty simple, by hand. So I have a spatula to mix and scrape my bowl with. I also have a kind of rigid spoon in case this isn't quite rigid enough to do the creaming. I think it will be, but just in case I have something a little bit more rigid. A lot of spatulas, especially ones at home, this top can be a little flimsy, so it doesn't really do the job well, so you may need something a little bit more rigid at home. I also have an ice cream scoop, or in the industry we typically refer to these as portion scoops, and that's going to be to scoop out my cookie dough when it's done. And then I also have a sheet pan lined with parchment. So that's my mise en place, very simple. So it's time to get to baking. So I'm going to set these behind me until I need them. And then I'm going to start with my, make sure you can see this screen, yeah. I'm going to start here with my fats and my sugars. So my fats are at room temperature, which is incredibly important in the creaming method, no matter what tools you're using, but by hand it's even more important, because if this was really cold, it'd be very, very hard to work with. So I'm just going to start by getting it mixed together. And this is going to take a little bit of elbow grease today. So this step is a very important step in the creaming method. So basically what we're going to do, and I missed a little, whoopsie, put it back in, not a problem. That's why we clean and sanitize our stations before we get started. So what's going to happen is, as we mix this, we're going to incorporate air cells into our mixture. So it's going to get larger in volume, and it's also really going to help with the spread of our cookies. So it's very important that we really do this step justice, even though it might feel a little exhausting. And you may find like my brown sugar is a little bit on the older side. Brown sugar likes to get kind of hard pieces in it. So sugar is hygroscopic, and hygroscopic means that it is very much attracted to moisture. So if there's moisture in the air, it's going to attract the moisture, and that's what makes it kind of clumpy, which my brown sugar is a little bit clumpy today. So if I can't get it out with my spatula, I might just break it with my fingers. My nice clean washed hands, of course. And I'm going to just keep on going. And you can see that this would be very, very difficult if you had not softened the butter. So all I did with this butter was I let it sit for a couple hours until it came to room temperature. A little tricky here in the bake shop because it is a little warmer than room temperature. But that's something that you have to kind of get used to, because it's very unlikely that you're going to work in a bake shop that is perfectly room temperature. So it's something you have to kind of play around with. So room temperature typically means around 70 degrees. And at 70 degrees, butter is soft, but not liquid. I've worked, when I was an intern years and years ago, I worked at the 60th floor of a skyscraper right next, I assume, must have been right next to the air conditioning unit for the entire building, because our bake shop typically was about 60 degrees, which is very cold. So even if we let our butter set out, it never really came to room temperature because it wasn't room temperature. When I worked at James Madison University, there was no air conditioning, and we were right next to the loading dock. So when it was hot outside, it would be like, and we had massive ovens too, so it would be like 90 to 100 degrees. Well, if I set butter out at 90 to 100 degrees, it would either get way too soft or even start to melt. So sometimes we have to be flexible. It's pretty close to room temperature, but because it's a little on the warmer side here, it didn't take as long as it might take at your house, or it might take here in this room in the winter, because it tends to be a little cold in here in the winter. Alright, so I've mixed this for a while, and you can see that I've kind of beat it back and forth as well, so that's going to help get it air incorporated. It does take some elbow grease. Could you imagine having to do this for a giant party if you had like 1,000 cookies to make? That's why in the industry we don't typically do these kinds of things by hand, but it is nice to know, because even in the industry you never know, machines could go down and you might need to make something, or you only need a tiny batch anyway and all the machines are being used by other bakers. Maybe it's worth it to go ahead and make it by hand. Who knows? Or you're just at home and you want to make cookies and you don't have a stand mixer or a hand mixer. Alright. So I've gotten to light and fluffy, so it's gotten a lot lighter in color and it's gotten bigger in volume, so I'm happy with that. Didn't need my hard rigid spoon after all, but again, if you're at home and your spatula is a little bit not as strong as mine, the ones that they make for houses typically aren't quite this strong, you may need to go for something a little bit more rigid. Like a wooden spoon would be a great option as well. You didn't have something that's hard plastic, anything like that. I wouldn't recommend a slotted spoon though, because then you'll kind of just keep getting it stuck in between and that'll be obnoxious. Okay, so my next step is to add my eggs gradually, which seems really funny because I only have one egg. How do I add eggs gradually if I only have one? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly mix it, and then I'm going to add a little bit at a time. And this is really, really important. We don't want to add all of our eggs at one time. We can actually cause what's known as curdling if we do it too fast. And it kind of just looks like it's all sloppy and kind of like individual little chunks of fat separated by liquid. It doesn't look very good at all. This is very, very important. And we'll talk about why in another video. But just know that it's very important. So I added half of my egg, and I just want to combine it until I don't see any different, any streaks of egg. It's all nice and combined. Very, very important that you combine it all the way before we go on to add our next egg. Alright, so we've got it all combined in, and now I can add my second egg. You might see that this is a little dark. I did have my vanilla stack scaled in here as well. Any kind of extract you might use, so if you were making cookies with almond extract or mint extract or lemon extract, whatever, this is the best time to add those extracts. So I'm just going to do the same thing again, and you can see it kind of like almost looks a little separated like when you first start to it, because liquids, water, and fat don't like each other. And then as it starts to combine, you can go a little faster. You don't want to go fast at the beginning because you might slop it out of the bowl and make a really big mess, which we don't want. So I just want to go until I have it all combined. Just like that. much of this off of my spatula. Make it mostly nice and clean. My next step is to add all of my dry. Now I have my dry mise en place here together. I'm not sure if you can see. So I have my baking soda, baking powder, and salt in separate little areas. I like to mise en place that way, so that way I can be like, oh, did I add the baking soda? Oh yeah, I can see it. It's right there. Just because sometimes when you're in the industry, there's a phone call or a customer or something's going on, and you get pulled away, and then you come back to your recipe and you're like, oh, did I add that? I don't remember. So I like to do it just like that, so I have like this visual reminder. So I want to go ahead and mix all these dry ingredients together before I add them, and you could have done this earlier before you started creaming your fats and sugar. Oops, your fats and sugars. That's totally fine too. It doesn't really matter, but it does matter that you do combine these together. So you could argue that I can mix these and I mix these and I mix this long enough, it's all going to be evenly distributed, which is true, but we need to be cautious of gluten formation, which happens when we have any time we have wheat flour that's agitated in the presence of liquid. We get gluten development, and we'll talk about that a lot as we go on through the year. And gluten is this strong elastic structure that the more we work it, the stronger it gets. And a lot of products like breads, we want that strong structure, but most stuff that we don't really want it to be strong. We want it to be there to hold our product together, but not strong, so it makes our product tough. So for cookies, we don't want it to be tough. So mixing this together here means I mix it less here. Right now, I can mix this all day long and not have any gluten formation, but as soon as I add it to this, this mixture, which has liquid in it, that's when I start to get gluten development. So I'm going to dump all of this in now that it's all nice and mixed. Okay, and now I'm going to mix this together, and because I don't want a lot of gluten, I'm going to be really cautious and not try not to overmix it. I only want to mix it as much as I have to. I also want to be cautious because I don't want to get flour all over the place, and I don't want to get it all over me because I'm all in black and you'll see it everywhere. Even though I still will get flour on me, don't worry. Most bakers do wear white chef jackets. Very uncommon to see bakers in black for that reason. Between flour and powdered sugar, it takes very little to make us look very, very messy. And the messier you look, the less the people start to think you're not very clean. Nobody wants to eat from your bakery. If they think you're not very clean, who wants to? Would you want to eat from a bakery when all the cooks and chefs look like they're dirty? No. So you can see as I continue to mix, it's starting to come together. And I tell you what, I'm just going to get in there with my hands, because when I go here in a second to portion it out, I'm going to get my hands messy anyway. But I'm kind of kneading it with the heel of my hand, which is going to help bring it together a little bit faster than that spatula was, which is good because remember, we want it to come together fast so we don't overwork our gluten. If this was a mixer, it would come together even faster because the mixer hand is able to move faster than my hand. And you can see pretty quickly, just as soon as I got my hand in there, it really starts to come together and look like a dough. So I just want to mix it until it's all cohesive. You can see I'm just kind of like moving the dough around to pick up any kind of stragglers that didn't quite want to get mixed in yet. Just like that. And this is my sugar cookie dough. So I'm going to go ahead and start portioning it. And I think I'm going to save maybe half of it or so, something like that, because I'd like to put some sprinkles in some to show you what that would look like with some kind of funfetti. But I don't want to make them all funfetti. So I've got my sheet pan, and I'm going to take my scoop, and I'm going to go into my dough, and then I'm going to take my other hand, and I can use my finger, or I could use the heel of my hand, just be consistent. And then I'm going to click it and it comes out. You can also use the side of the bowl. I typically like to use my hand. I think it becomes a little bit more consistent as you go, just like that. However you do it, you need to make sure it's consistent, and especially throughout your establishment. So if you were a baker and I was your employee and I did it one way and then you did it another, your cookies could be different sizes. And if you are a customer, you want to buy the same product every single time. You go to McDonald's and you get a quarter pounder, it's going to be the exact same sandwich every single time. It's very important, right? Because people like consistency. They don't want to say, well, last week I paid $1 for this giant cookie and this week it's tiny. Well, I'm not going to buy it anymore. So really important that we keep it nice and consistent. Also important because it's going to bake really evenly. If I have a lot of different sizes of cookies, it can bake really, really unevenly. So some of them will be burnt while other ones are not done. So all the way around, consistent is way, way better for your business, better for your product, better all the way around. So definitely important things to think about as your baker. Nothing you can make. We're going to make pretty small cookies. And maybe that is what you want. So a lot of my industry was catering experience. So you might have 4 or 5 desserts on a buffet. So I typically operated in small quantities or small servings because at a buffet, people want one of everything. If you're retail, you probably want to do larger options because this is kind of time consuming, right? So if I probably wouldn't sell one of these. I might sell like a pack of 3. Well, why sell a pack of 3 when I can sell one giant one? Because that's going to save me a lot of time. So if I was in a retail establishment, I'd probably be using a really big cookie scoop to do the same thing. So again, just something else that you have to think about when you're in the industry. What is my final goal here? All right. So I got my regular ones scooped out. So now I'm going to quickly add some sprinkles. So I'm just going to flatten this out a little bit. And I'm not going to measure these out. I'm just going to add some. You can see my handprint. And then I'm just going to fold them. And again, I don't want to overmix this. In a perfect world, if I was making Funfetti cookies, I would make an entire batch of Funfetti cookies. And I would have mixed the flour in until it was almost mixed in. And then add in my Funfetti. So I am risking overworking my gluten a little bit here. But I also don't want to waste too much of product. And I kind of want to show you a quick variation. You could also take this same cookie dough and add any kinds of chocolate chips, white chocolate chips, dried fruit, nuts, things like that. Typically, an actual chocolate chip cookie has a higher ratio of brown sugar, which you'll see in another video. But why not a sugar cookie with chocolate chips? I've never seen it on the market, so you could be a little bit different. It's important to be a little bit different because if a customer can get the exact same product at a grocery store for less money, that's what they're going to do because it's more convenient and it's cheaper. So it's nice to have a way to make your product a little bit different. So adding sprinkles is one way. Now with sprinkles, you do have to be careful because, and you can see it already, that little bit of movement, the color can start to bleed. And if you move, if you keep mixing and mixing and mixing, the colors are going to bleed terribly into your cookie dough. And then you'll get like these like bluish, greenish, brown streaks, which I don't know if you can market it, great, because I think nowadays you can market anything. Maybe there's some Harry Potter reference there or something. I don't know. But if you wanted to really retain the colors, you really want to mix it as little as possible. So I'm going to get all of these scooped out. And then we can get ready to bake. so I've scooped out all my cookie dough and I've kind of divided roughly in half. And half of it, you can see I had here nice and close together. I'm actually going to freeze this so I can show you what it looks like after you've frozen the dough and then bake it. And then I'm going to bake these right now. So I'm going to move this one out of the way. And then I'm going to finish these. Now I could bake them exactly like this and they'd be fantastic. But there's a really nice way to add some texture to your cookies, and that's just to coat it in a little bit of sugar. So basically all you have to do is take your cookie and just roll it around in your sugar like that, so it gets all nice and coated all the way around, just like that. And it kind of depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes when you have these scoops, the little bit of lines can remain in your cookie. So if you want to be extra, you can roll the cookies like that to make sure they're nice and smooth when they bake and then coat them with sugar. The only problem with that obviously is the labor. I don't typically do it just because it takes a lot of time, and then I can do like this. I can put several in at a time, just like that. Now you can see that I did not coat the ones I'm going to freeze in sugar, and that's because, again, sugar is hygroscopic. So if it goes in the freezer and then as it thaws, it's gonna, typically things as they thaw, they let out a little bit of moisture. So the sugar on the outside would actually kind of start to dissolve based on that moisture, and then kind of would give a really, it wouldn't give the same texture. So whenever you're coating a cookie in sugar, or sometimes there are cookies coated in cinnamon sugar or powdered sugar, you always want to do those at the last second, no matter when you've made the dough. The dough, well, whoops, will freeze fine, and the dough will be refrigerated fine, as long as, you know, in both scenarios it's nice and tightly wrapped. But you never want to coat it with sugar beforehand. So we're going to get these all coated. And you could even color your sugar if you wanted to, like if you were trying to make something for a baby shower or a sports team event, or just cause. Graduation party, you could do high school colors, you could do something like that. But today I'm just going to do white sugar, especially for my, what are these called? Funfetti. For these Funfetti cookies, because I think that would be a little odd to have one color on the outside. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's better. You tell me. Okay, so it's time to get these cookies in the oven. So these are going to go into a 350-degree oven, and I'm going to look for about 10 to 12 minutes for this size cookie. I don't typically like to give times for how long things will bake, because I find that students often will listen to them blindly. And there's a lot of variables that go into a product that can change their baking time. So for example, the size. These are pretty small cookies. If you were making much larger cookies, they would take a lot longer to bake. Temperature is another thing. So there's multiple temperatures. There's the actual temperature of the cookie. So these cookies were just made, so they're room temperature, and it's a little warm in here, so they're a little bit warmer than room temperature, which means they're going to bake faster than if this was cold in here when we made these cookies, or if we made them yesterday and put them in the fridge, or if we had made them yesterday and put them in the freezer. All of those things are going to change the baking time. Also, the temperature of the oven. There's no oven in the existence of the world that I'm aware of. I'm sure there is one. But very rarely do you find an oven that runs the exact same temperature all the time. Even from day to day, it can change. So we try to get closest to 350 degrees, but it might be 345 or it might be 360. So those can change. It can also change how often you open and close the door. So if I open the oven and I wait 10 minutes before I put it in, now my oven temperature has gone down drastically. So my cookies aren't going to be done in 10 minutes because now my oven's trying to catch back up on the heat. There's just a lot of variables that go into how long things take to bake. So for this size cookies, it's about 10 to 12 minutes, but it could be 9, it could be 13. So I'm going to put this in for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to rotate them. So I'm going to look at about the halfway mark, and I know 5 minutes is going to be about the halfway mark. Now, also, no oven ever is completely evenly hot all the way through. Typically, the back of your oven is going to be a lot hotter than the front of the oven, and the door is the reason. So as soon as we open the door to put our cookies in, cold air from the outside or the room that you're in is going to rush in, because your room is not 350 degrees, because that would be real uncomfortable. Maybe you would die, I don't really know. Let's not find out. But that cold air is going to rush in, and it's going to change the temperature of your oven, especially in the front of your oven, not so much in the back of the oven. And then when I go to rotate, the same thing's going to happen. So if I just put in my cookies and I just let them bake the entire time, the ones that might be in the back of this oven are going to be overbaked, while the ones in the front may not be baked enough. So really important to rotate as you go. So I'm going to set mine for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to check on them. I'll probably set them for another 5 minutes. Pretty rare that these cookies go under 10 minutes. So I'm going to put them in for 5, another 5, and then I'll take a look and see what they need. It's possible that I need to rotate them again. It's possible I just need another minute. I just take my context clues, I look at the color that they're getting. For nice soft cookies, you want just a barely hint of gold on the edges, just barely, where almost it's like just a little bit of gold and just barely starting to look dry, and the center should look like it's not done yet. And I know that's a really hard thing for students to get over, because it doesn't look like it's done, but it will be. So let's get these into the oven. Okay, so we are ready to get those sugar cookies in the oven. So whenever we open the oven, we want to make sure we're alerting everyone around us the oven is being opened. So we're going to say very loudly, hot oven! And then people know the oven is being opened. And then we're going to put in our sugar cookies, making sure not to touch any parts of the oven because it's hot. And then we're going to set our timer. Whoops, too many. For 5 minutes, and we're going to check on it. Okay, so my timer just went off, so I'm going to check on my sugar cookies. So I'm going to open it up, hot oven, make sure everybody knows, even though I'm the only one here. So I'm going to take it out, and you can see that they're starting to spread, but they haven't spread all the way. So I am going to rotate them. And I don't have any browning yet, and that's okay. Not that exciting yet, but it will be soon. I'm going to set another 5 minutes, and then we're going to check on it. So it's been 10 minutes, and you can see, hopefully you can see, that they just barely got a little gold on the edges, very bottom edges. And they still kind of look not quite done. That means they're done. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to let it cool on the sheet pan on a speed rack. A lot of recipes will show cookies cooling on a cooling rack. Well, you imagine making hundreds of thousands of cookies. There's no time to move them, so you always want to just a little bit underbake them because they're going to continue to bake on the sheet pan. So these are perfect, so I'm going to let them set up, and then I'll show you what they look like. Our sugar cookies have been out of the oven for a while, so I want to show you what they look like. But whenever we're touching ready to eat food, we want to make sure we're wearing gloves. Whenever we put on gloves, we need to make sure we wash our hands before, which I just did. And we never want to blow into them, because whenever we blow into something, spit particles come out, which is not good, especially now more than ever. So we get our gloves on, and then we can take a look. One thing I want to show you, just so you can see, so this is the cookie that I balled up and like rounded, and this one I didn't. Just so you can see the difference. This one's a little bit more smoother. This one has a little bit more crackles in it. Neither is right or wrong. They're just a little bit of a different look. Honestly, I kind of like the crackle. I think it's a little bit of character, which is kind of nice. And then here's our Funfetti ones. Oh, look, they look like my eyeballs. So you can see they have a little bit of added color, which is a little bit fun. You could add more or less sprinkles. You could also add, like I said earlier, any kind of colors. Oh, you could add red and green, make Christmas ones. That'd be cute. But you can see that they don't really have a lot of color to them. It's hard to see on the camera, but there's just a little bit of brown on the edge, and then there's just a little bit brown on the bottom. So that means that they're nice and soft on the inside, which is, see if I can get you a close-up, exactly what we're going for. So this is exactly what we want. Very happy with these sugar cookies. Alright, so it's the next day, and these, they're called sugar cookies. Sugar cookies and Funfetti cookies are frozen. So last step, remember whenever we're rolling our cookies in anything, we need to do it after they've been frozen. So I'm just gonna roll them all in their sugar. These are just the Funfetti ones. And then I thought I have some red sugar. This is called sanding sugar or decorating sugar. And it comes in kind of different granule size, but this is pretty similar to granulated sugar. So we can take a couple and toss them, you know, in a colored sugar, so we could see what that looked like. I thought, you know, 4th of July is coming up. Well, for me, probably not for you. 4th of July is this weekend, so red seemed appropriate. But this could be for Christmas or Valentine's Day, right? That's a good one. Whatever, or just red. Maybe if there's a sports team that's red. There goes my sports knowledge. Can't even think of one. Anyway, just so you can see kind of what that would look like, thought I'd do one in red for you. So as soon as I have all of these colors on, or the sugar on, they can go into my preheated oven, just like they did before, and I'll show you what that finished product looks like. Okay, so the snickerdoodles are out of the oven, and they look exactly like they did yesterday. So this is one of the Funfetti ones. You can see a little bit of gold on the bottom, just hinting up the side. And then if I go to break it, it's nice and soft and chewy on the inside, exactly like we want. Perfect. And then you can see how you could have fun with the color. So hopefully you can see nice and pretty finished product. Just a different way to show off some color if you want. But that's snickerdoodle. That's not snickerdoodles. Why would I say that's sugar cookies? Wow, it's time for me to go home. So those are our sugar cookies and our Funfetti cookies. But same method you can use for any kind of drop cookie.